Chapter 14. Together. Abigail dropped the kids into the centre of Brisbane on Saturday morning and left them to spend the day shopping and exploring their new hometown. She picked them up late afternoon and fed them another bang-up meal before the trip to the commune in the evening. Dana stayed home, so that it didn't look as if they were trying too hard. The survivors' original Brisbane church and ramshackle commune was now known as the Survivors' Museum. The current commune was a conversion of a failed shopping mall. The illuminated store signs had been replaced with wooden crosses and Christian slogans. There were less than 100 cars on a stretch of tarmac designed for thousands. Abigail pulled up by what had once been the main entrance to the mall. James grinned at Lauren as they got out of the back of the car. Today's special mall offer: crazy mind-bending religion, just $12.99. Lauren grinned, but Abigail shushed him. James, keep in character and remember to call me Mum. Okay, Mummy. 3 survivors emerged through the automatic doors at the main entrance. James recognised Ruth, Lauren recognised Mary, but they were led out by a grinning middle-aged man with rectangular glasses, beard, and a corduroy jacket. Hello, I'm Elliot Moss, the man said, grinning at Abigail. It's fantastic that you all took time to come out here and meet us this evening. Abigail grinned back. Well, actually, I was going to drop the kids off at the youth group. Oh, Elliot said sadly. Couldn't you just spare us a few moments? We've got coffee and excellent cake inside. How do you like your coffee? Strong and black, Abigail said. You'll love ours then. It's grown on survivor plantations in Nicaragua. We sell it to gourmet delis and coffee shops all over the world and make sure that the growers earn a decent living out of it. Abigail glanced at her watch before tapping the clipper to lock her car. I'll just pop in for a little while then. Great. Elliot beamed as he turned around and led them towards the X Mall. Ruth paired off with James and Lauren with Mary. They were led through the automatic doors beneath a sign that read, "Every honest soul is welcome here." The main hallway was run down and had lots of tasteless 1970s touches. Lurid orange floor tiles, dark wood panelling, and coloured panes in the windows. There was a musty smell, caused by too much floor polish and bad aircon. Elliot whisked them into a medium-sized X shop that now contained a reception area and a multimedia exhibition about the survivors. The displays focused upon Christian beliefs, charity work, and the humble beginnings of the survivors, rather than the $5 billion arc and Joel Regan's predictions of a nuclear apocalypse. At one end of the room, a narrator with a sturdy voice was telling the story of Regan and his rise from humble farm boy to a religious leader of global stature, while a giant video screen showed archive footage of Regan shaking hands with Bill Clinton, Elvis Presley, and the Pope. These shots were followed by pictures of contented African women carrying sacks of grain with the survivors' logo on it, and the interior of a vending machine repair shop staffed entirely by disabled people. Every year, the survivors raise more than $200 million for some of the world's neediest people. Mary handed James and Lauren clipboards with forms to fill in and asked them to look up as she snapped their photograph with a digital camera. It's just a formality, Mary said, in case you're in one of our groups and you have an accident or something. The form asked James for basic personal information, such as name, date of birth, home phone number, and address. James had read that the combination of friendliness and a desire to get hold of personal information were classic first steps in a cult's recruitment process. Elliot handed Abigail a much longer form, and she returned a look of surprise. "What's all this?" she asked, flipping through 6 pages of questions. "We'd like to have your contact details in case of an emergency involving a child at one of our youth groups," Elliot explained. "The rest of the form is a survey. We're trying to get a better idea of who is using our centre here. You don't have to fill it in, but we'd really appreciate it if you could help us out." "Well," Abigail said. "I tell you what, Abigail," Elliot grinned. "While you're doing that, why don't I indulge you with a cup of our amazing coffee and a piece of cake?" Abigail smiled. "That's really nice of you, Elliot." As Elliot headed off to get the cake, he took the forms from James and Lauren and looked at Ruth. "Why don't you take your young friends through to the community room?" They headed out through the shop front and halfway along the mall corridor, passing disused shops that had been turned into offices and storage areas. The community room was a giant open space that had once been the ground floor of a department store. It had been turned into a gymnasium with green rubber flooring. There was basic sports equipment spread around, like goalposts, basketball hoops, and cricket stumps. A hand-painted banner hung along the far wall. "Welcome to the Ocean of Love." There were about 50 kids spread over the gym, and based upon the amount of unfashionable footwear, 3/4 were survivors. Some kids were playing volleyball, others soccer, or cricket in practice nets. A bunch of the youngest kids played a leapfrog game, supervised by older teenagers. The orderliness surprised James, given that there was no obvious adult supervision. "Is there anything you'd like to try?" Ruth asked. Lauren had her eye on a giant trampoline and headed off with Mary. James spotted a miserable-looking kid in the corner and pointed him out to Ruth. "Isn't that Terry? From our class? I didn't think he was one of you lot." Ruth smiled. "Terry's father goes to one of our therapy groups." "He doesn't exactly look happy to be here." "He's a devil," Ruth said. James looked confused. "Why do you lot call people devils all the time?" Ruth smiled again. In fact, Ruth seemed to be smiling permanently. "We survivors believe that the world is divided into a battle between angels and devils. Survivors are angels. Anyone who isn't is a devil." "So am I a devil?" "Not for as long as you have potential to become an angel." James shrugged. "To be honest, I don't think I even believe in God." "Then I feel sorry for you," Ruth said curtly. "Does that make me a devil?" Ruth shook her head slowly. She was 14, the same as James, but she had an authority about her that made her seem far older. "James, if you're interested in our beliefs, I can give you a book to read. Maybe you could even speak to one of our counsellors if your mum will let you. But right now, it's Saturday night, and on Saturday night we invite all of our friends into the community room to play games and have fun. There's only one rule. Everyone has to join in." "What about Terry?" "He's a devil. As far as we're concerned, he's not here. So, what do you want to play?" James looked around the gym and spotted Lauren bouncing several metres into the air on a giant trampoline. A group of barefoot girls playing volleyball caught his eye. There were a few minges, but most of them were fit. Ruth worked out what he was looking at. "Volleyball? That's a really good idea, James." They walked over to the girls. "This is James, everyone," Ruth shouted excitedly. "This is his first visit to our community." All but one of the girls on the court were survivors, and they stopped playing and smiled while they queued up to shake his hand. "Have you played volleyball before?" a pretty redhead called Eve asked. "A couple of times," James said. "Not seriously, though." "That's good," Eve said. "We're not serious, and you're only allowed to say positive things on the court. Eh? Just follow our lead, Eve said, handing James the ball to serve. James rested the ball in his palm before batting it away. It skimmed limply over the net, making an easy return for the other team. Nice try, Eve said, as she backed up and pounded the ball back over the net. Crap, James said, as his clumsy swipe missed the ball entirely. Before he knew it, there were 3 girls in front of him, with survivors' smiles on their faces. James, Eve said sweetly, wagging a finger under his nose. You're doing great, but remember, you're only allowed to say positive things. Ruth had joined the other team to even up the numbers and was grinning through the net. She's right, James. Negative thoughts are for devils. James couldn't help smiling back at them. You girls are weird, he grinned. Wonderfully, positively weird. Eve laughed and gave him a friendly rub on the back. That's the spirit, James. Do you want to serve again? James hung out in the community hall for 2 hours, following the girls between volleyball, soccer, and the trampoline. When it got to 9 o'clock, a couple of adult survivors came in and switched off most of the lights. Everyone in the hall formed 2 circles, tired little kids in the inner circle and older kids and teenagers outside. Lauren's counsellor Mary stepped into the centre of the circle, holding a guitar. James's instincts told him that sitting in a big circle with a bunch of guitar-playing religious nuts was lame. But the survivor girls who'd all been smiling, chatting, rubbing his back, and hugging him for the past 2 hours dragged him into the circle, and James couldn't help laughing and smiling back. He felt really good as he sat cross-legged on the floor. Eve grinned, held his hand, and sat so close that her toes were touching his knee. Mary strummed the guitar. James was expecting her to start singing some dreary hymn, but she played a few bars and then chanted, "Boogie, woogie, woogie, woo!" Everyone chanted back noisily, "Boogie, woogie, woogie, woo!" The next line was, "La-di, la-di, la-di, la," and everyone chanted back. This chanting went on for 10 minutes, and James couldn't help getting into the stupidity of it all, with the 2 girls sitting on either side of him grinning and putting their arms around him. He looked over at Lauren and noticed she seemed to be having a ball too. At the end of it, Mary played a longer and much more dramatic version of the chanting song, getting faster and faster until all the lights got switched back on. She screamed out, "Are you angels?" And the kids, especially the little ones in the inner circle, jumped up and answered, "Yes, we're angels." Mary shouted back, "Little angels, go to bed." All the little kids began running happily out of the room. A few of them split off and joined parents who'd filed into the gym while the lights had been dimmed, but most were commune members, and they headed up a disused escalator to the living quarters. James couldn't help laughing as Mary called him and Lauren across to the centre. "Did you enjoy yourselves?" she asked. "Are you glad you came?" It was 9:30, and James was sweaty and tired after all the exercise, but he felt jubilant. "Yeah," James nodded. "It was a good laugh." Lauren was smiling too. Abigail wandered out from the group of adults at the back of the hall. "Hi, kids," she said. "Hey, Mum," James said. "Where have you been?" "I ended up staying here and talking to Elliot," Abigail said. "I'm thinking about enrolling in one of the counselling sessions for single parents." "Well, I certainly hope you all come back," Mary said. "You seem like such a nice family." Elliot joined them again. He was holding a carrier bag stuffed with goodies. "I'll walk you to your car," he said, as he handed Abigail the carrier. "Those are the books and CDs I spoke to you about. And I put in a bag of our Nicaraguan roast, and a few slices of cake for the kids." Abigail looked at all the stuff inside the bag. "I must owe you money for some of this." "I wouldn't hear of it," Elliot said. "Just promise that you'll give me a call if there's anything you want to talk about." As James, Lauren, and Abigail headed down the mall corridor towards the main entrance, Elliot, Eve, Ruth, Mary, and a couple of younger girls Lauren had befriended walked with them. They followed through the automatic doors and stood around the car. Even though it was dark, it was still extremely hot, and Abigail reached inside the stifling car and turned on the air conditioning. They waited outside for a minute while the interior cooled down. Eve smiled at James. "You'll be coming back to see us again, won't you?" "Sure," James nodded enthusiastically. "Next Saturday." "Maybe even sooner," Elliot said. "You could come by with your mother when she attends our single parents group on Wednesday." "I guess," Lauren smiled. "Maybe my big sister can come too." The survivors headed back indoors, waving as Abigail switched on the engine while James and Lauren belted up in the back. "That was fun," Lauren said. "I think the mission's going well," Abigail said. James realised that he'd been playing sport and chanting with the survivors all night and hadn't considered the mission for over an hour. He looked anxiously at his sister. "I think we might have enjoyed ourselves a bit too much in there." "Hey?" Lauren said, as she wiped her shining forehead on the sleeve of her t-shirt. "I actually want to go back in there and do that again," James explained. "With the grinning girls and everyone touching me and paying me heaps of attention. It felt really nice." Lauren realised what her brother was getting at. "We knew how it worked. We read all the books and that, but we still fell for it." Abigail looked between the front seats at her two passengers. "Are you kids saying what I think you're saying?" James rubbed his eyes and looked ashamed of himself. It was like falling under a spell.